House of Hoosier podcast brought to you by the Field of 68. It is the evening of Thursday, January the 23rd, 2025, and we are recording this. He is Ian Plaskoff. I'm Austin Platt, and we come to you after Indiana splits a pair on the road. And they get back in the win column after the disastrous home game against Illinois. They beat Ohio State in overtime. They blow a lead in the second half, but win by one in OT, and then drop a game to Northwestern, which nowadays is, I mean, just like it feels like a religious practice that Northwestern beats Indiana now five straight times that the Wildcats have had the Hoosiers' number, and Chris Collins remains undefeated against Mike Woodson. We'll get into all of that, talk about what this means going forward. Ian, how you doing, man? First off, it's bitterly cold outside. We wish we had something more fun to talk about. It's brutal. I don't know what happened to global warming, but it was like nice last week, like 30, 40 degrees, and now we're like the wind chill's like -1 when we walk outside.
Yeah, it's been a struggle. I think yesterday it reached like -9 on the wind chill or something like that. A little bit better today in the 20s, but yeah, the cold makes it difficult, man. And especially when there's some low quality basketball being played, it really makes the winter months a little bit more difficult than it would be otherwise.
Yeah, it just feels like late January, like after the holidays are over, once you take all of the holiday decorations down, once you open up all the presents and write all the thank you notes, and then the next snowfall comes, it's like, all right, I've had enough of this. Like, there's nothing else to cheer you up. Sure, the days are getting, slightly longer, slightly. It's not, the sun isn't setting at, 4 o'clock, it's 5 o'clock maybe. And I know we have the advantage being in Bloomington. We essentially get an extra 45 minutes of light at night because we're so close to Central Time. Regardless, Indiana went to Central Time last night and probably wish they never did because it was 79-70 loss. First, we'll touch on the Ohio State win, considering it was really much needed and it was a good pick me up after what happened against Illinois. 77-76 final. Indiana did not play very well in the first half. We're only down by six, even though it felt like more. They played an incredible second half, really, for the first 10 minutes. They went up by double digits, then completely let it slip away. And the game went to overtime, and Indiana's kind of just scratched and clawed its way to a 1 point win. Anthony Leal, the hero once again. Luke Goody, a career high 23 points off of 4 of 7 shooting from downtown. Umar Ballo, another phenomenal double-double, played 40 of the 45 minutes and 21 points, 15 rebounds, his 40th career triple-double. Just your initial thoughts after this Ohio State win kind of felt like a nice deep breath, a nice sigh of relief to see a win.
There are so many people after this game that were like, "Oh, Indiana didn't play well. Oh, they shouldn't have won this game." Ugh. They won the basketball game. When you look at the end of the season and you look at teams, you look at resumes, whatever, you're not going to be like, "Oh, Indiana didn't play well, but they still won." No, you're going to look at that 1-0 on that record for that particular day. So Indiana won the basketball game, didn't necessarily play their best brand of basketball, doesn't matter. They won the game. They picked up a quad one win on the road. I was really happy with it. Now, when they did blow a 10-point lead late in the game, that was a little bit concerning, but late game scenarios, they ended up coming through. They were about 2 inches away from Bruce Thornton saying no to that. But hey, again, you can complain all you want. I know a lot of people are frustrated still, and they expect more of this Indiana basketball team, myself included. But Indiana won. You should not be mad about Indiana winning a basketball game. They won the game on the road. Didn't play the best game, like I said, and it doesn't matter. They picked up a road win, so I'm happy with it. Now, would I have liked them to carry over in Northwestern? Yes, but we'll get into that later. But Ohio State did what they needed to do in Columbus there. Indiana did for the win.
Yeah, I mean, Carlisle had a really nice game. That was a good sight. 13 points off of 5 of 12 shooting. Um, Indiana kind of found its groove. Really didn't make too many threes. 6 of 20 from beyond the arc. Four of them were by Luke Goody, who had just a phenomenal night, really altogether. Hit the shot to give IU the lead in OT. Umar Ballo again, just a force down low, and just kind of one of these games where it's always like, all right, it feels like you can always just beat Ohio State and kind of. It feels like every time I use beating Ohio State, it's like to get off a long losing streak or it's off of a bad loss. And every year kind of feels that way. And now the last 2 years, Indiana has gone on the road and won in Columbus after coming from behind, and even in Woodson's first year, they almost won that game, and then that game went to overtime at City Arena. So Ohio State under Jake Diebler, just I don't think they're a very good team. It's going to be a quad one win, so that's great. We can talk about that all we want, but even so, just it was more just kind of a sigh of relief. Like, all right, they won the game. They didn't embarrass themselves after the embarrassment that we all saw at Assembly Hall. It's like, all right, you can hold on barely to a win, but it kind of showed again IU has flaws. And like every time IU goes on the road and has a lead, it's like we always feel like they're gonna blow this. Like I felt the same way watching the game at the Plester. Like you're up by 16 with 10 minutes left, and then you're biting your nails with 3 minutes left. It's a 3 or 4 point game. Like that's just the way IU has been, and it just shows the inconsistencies of this team. But to be fair, with Renew obviously didn't play in this game in Columbus, and it feels like without him, I'm more comfortable with the guys that come off the bench and the way IU's rotations have been, knowing that you're without Renew. And there was no Bryson Tucker. He hasn't played the last 2 games, so a shorter bench. Carlisle, 36 minutes. We know how good he is defensively. Langdon Hatton, 5 minutes, made a shot and got to the line as well. 3 points for him. And then Galloway had 7 points. Indiana's played well this year when Galloway has made at least 3 shots. And I mean, look at Galloway's line: 5 rebounds, 6 assists, 7 points. Like that's all you need really from Galloway to win games, is just a stat line like that. And that's what the Hoosiers got.
Yeah, and we'll get into this more, but it was really interesting to see how this team maneuvered its bench lineup with Renew back. But if you look back to this Ohio State game, I really thought, and unfortunately I was wrong. I thought that this would be kind of the lighted up game for Kanan Carlisle, like where he finds his confidence, where he finally figures it out off the bench, and then carries that over, which unfortunately didn't happen. But it was really interesting. I'd been keeping track of his shooting splits, and the moment I tweeted out when Kanan Carlisle threw up his 100th shot of the year, the moment I tweeted out that he shot 27 for 100 in those 100 shots, he made like four out of his next six or something like that. So I guess the announcer jinx works through text. Um, but I really like what Kanan Carlisle showed in this game. Langdon Hatton did a nice job as well, filling in when needed. And then you look at the game against Northwestern, and Renew comes in off the bench, and then no Bryson Tucker. They really didn't play too deep into the bench. I didn't see much of Kanan Carlisle in that game, and Hatton didn't play. So it was really like a seven, eight, maybe 8-man rotation, if I can remember that correctly. But solely focusing on this Ohio State game, I like the lineup that they did there, and that only works again with Carlisle shooting the way that he did in that game, and with Hatton playing decently as well. But Luke Goody spaces the floor so much for a guy like Umar Ballo that is a focal point of the offense down low. And when you have that pull out to the perimeter, even when guard like Miles Rice did not play well in this game. Anthony Leal didn't really do anything offensively. This is the Ohio State game we're talking about. Ibaka was still in his big shooting slump, but still, you had Luke Goody out there who was a threat. He had 23 points, and pulling the defense out to the perimeter allowed Umar Ballo to get going. And Ballo had a nice game: 21 points, 8 for 14 from the field, 5 of 7 from the free throw line, 15 rebounds. Um, and he's been one of the few consistent bright spots that we've never really had to worry about. But I'm going to give credit to Luke Goody on that. And I like that Mike Woodson kept him in the starting lineup, even though it was kind of expected because Renew wasn't going to play that much. But I hope that continues because we've seen a little bit of both since Renew came back, saw a little sample of that Northwestern, and obviously the 4 games before that with him out. So there are some things to consider. But one thing that I know for sure is the two big lineup should not be coming back.
That's for sure. Well, we'll quickly put a bow on this. This was like the perfect two-man game for IU. Like the high-low action worked. Even when Cody passes up a shot, which I think he's been doing still a little too much. Like when he's feeling it, I'm fine with him like catching and shooting. Like immediately, I know that's not more of a shot. He likes to kind of, I guess, prepare himself more, kind of step into it is the term I'm looking for. But even so, like you'll get the ball right back into Ballo, who will go to work, and it feels like Indiana's bigs have done a good job over the years, like dominating against Ohio State and their lineups. And I know that the Buckeyes haven't met expectations under Jake Diebler, who was good last year as the interim once Holtman left. But I mean, even against who was the big guy from a few years ago from Ohio State, whose name is just
EJ
slipping my mind.
Liddell.
Yes, Liddell. Like even like Indiana did, I think matched up well. Like even I think Trace had a few good games against him, if I remember correctly. So kind of Woodson's Wood. I think honestly, the Bigs have always played well against Ohio State, and that's something that the Hoosiers have always had over the Buckeyes. And I think it's what Indiana's only lost once to Ohio State in Woodson's tenure, and that was that game we were talking about, that overtime loss in Columbus. And Ohio State's going to, I think, finish towards the bottom of the Big Ten, although everyone's above Indiana in the net rankings. So, hey, every win counts. Every road win is a good one, I guess. And maybe that just shows where Indiana is right now. Anything else you want to talk about Columbus Friday night? Kind of just like basketball game was on. Like no one, I don't think, was like really like, ooh, 8 o'clock. I'm gonna sit on my couch and turn the IU game on. It's like, oh, Indiana's on Fox. Let's just kind of just find the channel, flip around.
I will say I was pretty excited to watch that game. I From the beginning of the year I thought that was a game that they would win. I mean, we went through the list of away games. That was my clear choice. And I did sit down about it 7:45, watch a little pregame, and then Gus Johnson and Jim Jackson popped up on my TV, and I knew it was going to be a fun night from there. But no, I was happy with this game. I thought there were a lot of good things. The most important of those being a win, and a good win, because I do want to go through this later in that Indiana's wins in the non-conference have really meant nothing at the moment. So this was a solid win. There were some things to take away on the positive side, the negative side. But unfortunately, a lot of those positive things did not transition into Evanston on Wednesday. So, yeah, I'm happy with the win. I know people are still going to be mad. They'll be mad no matter what, but I'm not one of those people.
It's just the effort for Indiana in that Friday night game against Ohio State. Just the fact that, I think it was the most embarrassing loss in Woodson's 4 years, the one against Illinois, and to come back in that kind of, 3 days later and put together a pretty good performance, all things considered. Like, and something I will get into this quickly with Northwestern, but like Indiana has gone down early in basically all of the true road games so far this year. And they've at some point put together a run to either retake the lead or get the game tied. Like Nebraska, Indiana was down by like 10 early. It's like, all right, let's turn the game off. No, Indiana, I don't know if they ever took the lead in the first half. I think they did at some point because they went on a big run themselves. But at Penn State, Indiana was kind of wire to wire, had the lead. But this game against Ohio State, they went down early, kind of like, one of these games where, Indiana gets blown out again on the road. That didn't happen. They've got it to within 6 at half, even though they did not play well enough in my mind to keep it within that margin. Just Ohio State did not play well either. And then this game against Northwestern, now we'll move the page in the 79-70 loss. Just a crazy game of runs. Like, I mean, Northwestern comes out, they lead by 10 early. It was the Ty Berry show. He had like 11 first half points, one of the best sixth men in the conference, I would say the country, considering he was part of that crew last year. That three guys on Northwestern a year ago were over 40% from three. The first team ever in the Big Ten to have three guys on one team shoot over 40%. Granted, the the elephant in the room is that the 3-point line wasn't there the entire time the Big Ten has existed, but it's still a pretty impressive stat. But Indiana goes down 10. They go on a huge 18-2 run, a phenomenal way to end the first half. They're up by 6, and then back and forth you go, and then it's Northwestern that kind of completely pulls away. They had like an 8-0 run and like a 15 or 16-1 run sprinkled in there and late on, and they win this game by 9. It kind of felt like more than that. Northwestern missed a ton of free throws. Indiana got some steals at the end to make it a little more interesting, but in the end, there were a few tough shots. Barnhizer and had a few tough ones, and then I think he had that dunk where he landed on his face, which honestly was a good way to describe Indiana in that second half. Just completely fall flat on their face and drop this one by 9 in a game where Northwestern was not at its best offensively in the first half. Northwestern's not an offensive team. We knew this coming in. Chris Collins has always preached defense, and they scored 54 points in the second half. They made 13 threes as a team, the most they had made in, I think, over a year or two. and they win this one rather comfortably by 9 points. I was there, Ian. Just kind of a tough watch, but after the end of the first half, it's like, all right, there's a ton of IU fans here. It's an early start. This was not the usual like Welsh-Ryan like student section kind of takes over the animosity from the home team. It just wasn't that way, and Indiana I think fed off the visitors' energy. But the second half just wasn't the same, and really it came down to the two big lineup re-entered with like 8 minutes left, and from there it completely went downhill.
Yeah, this was a clear tale of two halves. The first half looked completely different than the second half, really for both teams. And the difference in this one was that one team was able to make their halftime adjustments offensively, and the other team did not. Um, and I think we know the answer of who was who there. But in the first half, I mean, there was really nothing impressive to me offensively on either side. The first four possessions of the game were turnovers, two on each side. Um, I think it was like 8 to 7 in the turnover category for the first half. And then Ty Berry really broke this one open for a little bit. He went on an 11-0 individual scoring run. And that's when I was like, oh boy, it's going to be one of these. Like one player gets going, then you start to gravitate towards him, and then everybody else is going to start making their shots because they'll be open because everybody's guarding Ty Berry. That wasn't the case. Mike Woodson called a timeout, which usually he calls too late, but this time I'm going to give him credit because he called it at the right time. And then now Indiana didn't play offensively very well after that timeout, but they allowed 2 points the rest of the half in 9 minutes. Um, and Woodson said, I thought we played a beautiful first half. At least defensively, I agree with him there. Um, and then, it's a little bit back and forth. You could tell out of the halftime break that Northwestern was coming out with a little bit more energy. They started to make more shots. They were much more active on the glass, on the defensive end, but it was still close. And then the under eight timeout came, and after that, it was like I think it was a 21-4 run from Northwestern, and it was just Indiana kept turning the ball over. The defensive miscommunications kept coming. There was no cohesion on the team. Woodson didn't want to call any timeouts. And then Northwestern just started hitting every three-pointer known to. It was like me in our sports media pickup game. It was ridiculous. Um, so 14-point lead at 70-56, and you're feeling like, okay, there's 3 minutes left in this game. This game's over. I'm going to turn it off. And then this was the biggest thing that I took away from this game, despite all the bad play on both sides of the floor. It was 70-56, and all of a sudden it was 72-68. They did not give up like they usually do when they're down double digits in the second half. They were, Goody and Mbaka went on their own little scoring run. Um, and they kind of kept the game alive and on the defensive end as well. A lot better on the cohesion in the final 3+ minutes. And even though Northwestern came away with this one with the free throws, it just felt like there was a little bit of added urgency in the final, after the final media timeout. It's something we haven't seen in road games, and even though they lost, that is a positive takeaway from this game. A lot of negatives, but I will take that away as one of the positives.
Yeah, that little spurt that you had on the court was something else. We were guarding each other the entire time. Us being in the same class last semester, like, all right, we'll guard each other, we'll have some fun. And I was like, all right, it's not a bad matchup for me. I have the size on, I have definitely the height. I'll get inside, I'll spin, I'll score. And in the last game, it's like, holy smokes. I'm like, I'm letting you shoot. You haven't made one yet. All right, once you make one, then I'll respect you. And then it's like boom, 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 boom. I mean, you look like Jalen Leach like in the last like 4 minutes, just could not miss a shot. Um, Something about Indiana and always keeping games close against Northwestern late is like unbelievable. Like, I think the game where everyone was suspended 3 years ago, that game Northwestern had Indiana led at half, but Northwestern, kind of controlled the second half. I think Indiana kept it maybe closer than it could have been. when the teams faced off 2 years ago at Assembly Hall. It was over. It was, I think, right before the second semester started. And Indiana played like garbage in the first half and went on this big run to try and come back at the end and lost by one. That was the game where Trey Galloway had that like three-quarter court shot at the very end to make it from 4 points to 1 point. But that was another game that was essentially over at the 2 minute mark. Then, the teams played in Evanston that year, and Indiana goes down by 16 and a half. They have this huge run. They get some steals at the end. I think Miller Cobb taps the ball to Trace Jackson Davis. He dunks it. The game's tied at 30. We all know what happens after that with Boo Buie and Trey Galloway. That was mentioned by many people last night. That was the first time Indiana returned to Welsh-Ryan since that game. And it's funny, at Northwestern, they have that. They had that exact play on their intro video, and I was talking to Northwestern broadcasters, and they're like, they chose the wrong angle because it is as clear as day that Boo Buie like chicken wing, like clear separation and a clear elbow right into the gut of Galloway. That's a funny side story, but like teams played at Assembly Hall last year, and Indiana lost, and that game was like kind of close. Like Indiana was playing the free throw game, Northwestern missed some free throws, and Indiana kind of like I think they lost by 6 or 7, maybe it was 8, but like that game was like 12 points with like 2 minutes left. And in this game, it's like in the blink of an eye, this 12-point lead is now all of a sudden four. Um, it was still too little, too late. I'll get to the kind of the end of game stuff later, but it's just like this game is so frustrating because I said this on the air last night. This was like a sink or swim game. Like you can, I said this, and I think I said this on the podcast last time. Like you could have completely washed away the Illinois loss by winning this game, having coupled it with the win against Ohio State. Like you go on the road, you get two quad one wins, and I think in my mind you completely erase that one loss because that would have given you um, three wins, three quad one wins all on the road. Like that would have been a great start, and it's not even February 1st. Like you could not have asked for anything better for as bad as the non-conference was. And Indiana just completely sank in the second half. Like defensively, it was the same sets essentially that Northwestern was running, and the communication just was awful. There was no help defense. It's almost like, when you go to a fast food restaurant and you open your car door and you leave the drink on top of your car, you'd hope that someone else gets in the car would communicate to you that you don't drive away. That was me last night at Portillo's after the game. Got a chocolate cake shake, put it on top of the car, opened the door. I looked, and the guy, my buddy Ben Haller, Ben, of course, of all people, obviously my co-host last year, we joked about this, gets in the car, and his drink is sitting right next to me in the cup holder. I thought it was my drink. We back out, we start going out of Portillo's, and I hear a thud, and I'm like, there was something on the top of my car, wasn't it? And I look down, I'm like, oh shoot, that's Ben's drink. Put the car in reverse, and the shake is all over the road. The cup is like completely spliced in half. There's nothing left. I like picked up the cup and chucked it. And I was like, this is disgusting. You got to have communication, and that was obviously my fault. But Indiana's communication defensively was horrible as well. Like the same things, over helping. When Umar Ballo is sitting just in the middle of the paint defensively, and someone drives on him, you do not need someone to come in and help. Like I don't care who it was. Like all of Northwestern's players were hot in the second half, but you do not need to help. And pick and roll, like Ant Wright put together a phenomenal film clip today. I don't know if you saw it. It was like 7.5 minutes, went through basically all of Northwestern's threes in that second half. And like most of it was just like on pick and rolls, like guys just not switching. Like Northwestern size wise, all their like Martinelli, Barnheiser, Nicholson was basically didn't even exist last night on the offensive end of the floor. But Leach, like most of these guys are the same size. Like just switch off of them. Like Leal, Goody, Galloway, Carlisle, like they can all switch. Like I'm fine with that. And Martinelli on Goody was a disaster for IU. Like Northwestern found the matchups that they really liked, but there was just no communication. It's this overhelping leading to a wide open three. This is what we saw last year in the non-conference. And it's at this point where it's like, yeah, you can try and preach that as much as you want with coaching, but how much of it, like Cannon Carlisle is losing Ty Berry? Like that just can't happen. There's no communication, and the defensive lapses are just so uncharacteristic of this team. At least what we saw when this team was really good defensively in the Big Ten, it's just fallen off. And it's like, how much can you blame Mike Woodson for this? Or is this really on the players? Like, where's the leadership? Trey Galloway should not be getting caught in screens. Anthony Leal should not be getting caught in screens. Those are two guys defensively that are too good to be letting that happen.
I'm going to list four players from last night, and I'm going to ask you if you know the significance of these four players. Ty Berry, Brooks Barnheiser, Jalen Leach, and Nick Martinelli.
They all had double digits, and they all at some point had an incredible stretch of scoring at some margin of
They
the game.
they scored all 54 second half points for Northwestern. Those four.
That's unbelievable. I didn't realize that.
And Northwestern's a team that scores 72 points per game. 54 points in the second half after playing what Mike Woodson said was a beautiful first half, which I'll give him credit for. It was, at least on the defensive end, because that's where this game was lost, is on the defensive end. 54 second half points from four players, and all of them scored in double figures in the second half. On the game, Northwestern shot 62.5% from the field and 9 for 14 from three. Oh no, that was just the second half. My bad.
Yeah.
He shot 62.5% in the from the field in the second half, 9 for 14 from three in the second half. After scoring what 25 points in the first half. Like that's where coaching comes in. You go to the locker room, Chris Collins takes the squad in there and says, "Hey, we're going to, take advantage of Indiana's lack of communication on defense. We're going to push them out to the perimeter. We're going to pass the ball. We're going to play fast, and we're going to get threes." So what does Northwestern do? Exactly that. Indiana comes out of the halftime break and just falls apart. Like Northwestern made, I think, like their first five field goals coming out of the break and immediately took the lead right back that Indiana worked so hard for on that 18-2 run in the first half. And then, yeah, Mike Woodson said it himself. He said they played their butts off in the second half and we didn't. And that was pretty clear. I mean, we've talked about the defensive miscommunication. I'm going to talk just about the effort. Like there were some lackadaisical passes. There was really nothing inspiring on the offensive end. The rebounding wasn't great. And Northwestern in that second half just saw that and ran with it, and they only needed four players to do it. When you're giving up 54 points to four players, you know there's a problem on the defensive end. And a big part of that was that Northwestern scored 17 points off of nine second half turnovers from Indiana.
And in the first half, points off turnovers, Indiana turned the ball over. I think it was like six. It was six or eight. It was eight
Eight
times in the
times.
first half. Northwestern only got 4 points off of them. Now, a lot of it because Indiana just like bounced the ball off their foot and the ball went out of bounds, which obviously slows things down and contributes to the pace of that. And Indiana had 11 points off of Northwestern seven turnovers in the first half, but in the second half, a completely different story. And just the passing, and not only that, it was like there were some like simple box outs down low that just did not happen. The one rebounding play where I like would just jaw dropping. Brooks Barnheiser, this was Northwestern was shooting. This was in the second half. They're shooting towards their own basket, and this is early on. It's like 1-on-4. It's a long rebound, and like Anthony Leo's just like sitting there, like at the half court line, waiting for the ball to come to him. And Barnheiser like somehow like tips the ball and grabs it. And there's four guys around him. All of his teammates have essentially run back on defense, and he's the one that grabs it. And then I think he actually goes back up, and I think he against Ballo, I think goes up and like finishes really tough at the basket and almost puts Ballo on his backside. He was like stumbling backwards, practically towards like the stanchion. Like that play was just unbelievable to watch because there's no effort. And for most of the time last night, like the lack of communication is one thing, like, and that's a lack of like mental effort, just the ability to like call things out. What do you see? Like, what is Balo seeing down low that everyone else is missing? But just the not grabbing rebounds was terrible. There was another one which I thought was the icing on the cake. I also did order a delicious chocolate cake from Portillo's, by the way, on the topic of cake. I got the chocolate cake shake, which only lasted like a few sips.
But
And
that
then,
one you didn't leave on your car.
no, the chocolate cake, luckily, I put it in the bag. That was in the car. I started eating that on the way back. That is so darn good. Portillo's is so unbelievably good. And everyone else, I'm not from the Midwest, so I only get it a few times a year. It's so freaking, that chocolate cake is unbelievable. But speaking of icing on the cake, that Balo does not box out Nicholson on one of the possessions late. And he's just like standing there by the rim, waiting for the ball to come to him. Nicholson's like practically like next to him, like towards the baseline. Nicholson like gets out, somehow out muscles Balo, grabs the ball, passes it back out. This was right after Leach made two straight threes. So I think it was both Goody and Leo go straight to Leach. Barnhiser's left wide open at the top of the key. One dribble, knocks down the three. I mean, it was just like kind of just it was a game of runs. That was as simple as it was. Indiana was in this game with 8 minutes left. The two big lineup just did not work. We'll get to Renew in a second, but just the little things like the effort that we saw against Illinois in some stretches reared its ugly head again against Northwestern. You have to box out if you're Umar Ballo. There was one time, a few times Luke Goody did not box out. Like just the rebounding was bad. Some of the stretch passes were horrendous. Like that one pass from Anthony Leal as he's trying to go like down the floor in the first half, it gets intercepted and then I don't know who, but goes right back up against Leal. Then got the foul. It's just like dumb turnovers from guys you should not expecting to be doing this. That's the biggest thing that frustrates me. And I look at the captains, like look at Rice and look at Galloway. I thought Indiana should have run the offense a little more through Rice. We can get to that as well. But it's like whatever in the first half, the first like 5 minutes just did not work. Indiana's like, all right, we're not going to do that the rest of the day. Like you can try it again because you dribble the ball off your foot does not mean it was a bad set. Like there were a bunch of times where Rice got like within 10 feet of the basket and had a good look. And one time he had the jump stop and he traveled. Another time he dribbled it off his foot. Another time he tried to pass it down low to Ballo. Like some of the baseline drives were terrible, like trying to force the ball back into the passing lanes. Like both teams did a good job, I think, with the active hands down low. Like Galloway had a few good steals, but just the effort at times is just lackadaisical, and it's not good enough, especially when the crowd like was in it for most of the game. The IU fans, like most of them are from Chicago. This is a game they look forward to every year, and now it's like, well, you feel like Indiana's going to lose this game every single year, and these are games where Indiana has leads. You've had chances to beat Northwestern each of the last 5 times, and you're 0-5, and all 5 games it's like a combined 20 points. Like that's how close it's been.
Yeah, I'm looking back to one specific moment in the Ohio State game. And I think we all know what I'm about to talk about here is when Thornton missed the shot and the camera pans to Mike Woodson and he is elated. The players are all, cheering and screaming and Woodson's got a big smile on his face. The team, it goes right back to the bench. They're all hugging each other, whatever. Then you look at the Northwestern game and it's like that never happened. It's like it was the same like I don't even know how to explain it. It's like they didn't gain any momentum from that win. In that there was no added effort or energy to say, "Hey, I'm going to try and build off of this." And this is all in the second half because Indiana played a good first half. I'm going to give them credit there, but in the second half in particular, everything just felt like it went away. Like the progress that they made at Ohio State, the bounce back from Illinois, proving yourself, and like you said, a sink or swim game in this one. This just felt like just a regular old game. In the effort and energy level, I didn't see any intensity in that second half. It was more like, oh, they're starting to hit threes, and I'm just gonna hang my head and go through the motions on both sides of the floor now. And I can't get behind that. Like I'm going to give them credit for a lot of good things that they did in this game. Mbako got back on track. Goody had a solid game. The first half defense was great. They showed nice resiliency. And then, so those, I'm going to give them credit for those good things. But one thing that I won't get behind is just the lack of energy and effort that led to the miscommunications just because the mental state just wasn't there. And that's big for me. And I really didn't like that.
People were like mad that like Mike Woodson celebrated after the Ohio State win. Like, wow, you beat like a team that's probably going to finish below you. They're going to finish, I think, in the bottom half of the Big Ten. And you're celebrating an overtime win in a game where you lost a 10-point lead. Like, your coach is allowed to show emotions. Like, I see a clip every time I'm on Twitter of Danny Hurley doing something at with UConn. Like you can't have it both ways. Like either you want your coach to kind of like give them the straight face, like the poker face. You don't know what they're thinking at all times. Like they're never satisfied. Like is this like did Kurt Signetti ever smile this year at Friday football? Like coaches are allowed to smile. Like we can get happy when our coach shows emotion, and he sure as hell let us smile out when they were up 66 nothing against Purdue. Like that photo was framed everywhere. And Mike Woodson can celebrate. Like it's a big win against Ohio State. But then you're not showing any emotion. Like I don't you obviously watched the game, and that the in-game hit you did with Andy Katz in that first half where he said Malik Renews, was something about he just wasn't 100%, like his conditioning is terrible was the quote. He is sitting down as that media timeout starts, and he literally has to get told to get up and go do that interview. Like he did not want to do it whatsoever. And at that point, and whatever, he wants to say something to his players. He gets asked one question, he answers it with 5 words, and then he goes back and sits down again. Like the emotion and the energy there, it's so telling of the way this team was. And even in the first half, you had a ton to be happy about. Northwestern played like garbage in that first half, aside from that Ty Berry flurry of threes. They didn't make their free throws. They didn't really get too many good looks, and Indiana played very, very well defensively. Like, there's no doubt about that. Northwestern's not a great offensive team, but I mean, giving up 25 points on the road in the first half to any Big Ten team, you got to take that and be happy. And there wasn't any of that. And even so, like he's yelling at his players always, and there's always he always pulls out one thing that he can get mad at. But it's so telling of the where this program is at, where there's nothing to smile about. Like you got one win in overtime in a game you nearly blow in, and you're celebrating as you should. Everyone was happy that Indiana won that game. There's no doubt about that. But then just the body language you're showing, and I get it, the officiating was kind of all over the place. There were plenty of stops. The shot clock was messed up every possession, it felt like. There wasn't a ton of flow in that first half, but you're up by 6. Like you have a great end of the half. Even that last possession, I think Indiana gets a block, they get a stop, and then they work a great possession. They get a ball out to Mbako, drives all the way. I think Ballo does a great job setting a screen, giving him the easy look for a layup. And Chris Collins oddly called the timeout, like zero point 0.8 seconds left. They didn't get a shot off or whatever. But like, show some emotion. Like the guys should have shown some more emotion going into the half. Like the crowd was on its feet. That was an awesome end to the first 20 minutes. You just don't see that in the second half, and it showed with their performance.
You know what I felt was interesting? I was watching this from home. But when I started hearing um, different IU chants, like there were like 3 or 4 different ones that kind of took over the arena. And it didn't really feel like the players fed off that energy. Like, I don't know if people understand how hard it is. I get India is a little bit of a special case, but getting a chant started on the road over a good student section in the Big Ten and hearing it over the broadcast and like having it go for a solid segment of the game, like a whole 4 minute segment. That's impressive. It's really hard to do, and that should tell you something about what your fans want out of you. And it didn't feel like it did anything. Like they kind of took it for granted or something. I don't know. Because right after that happened, the Northwestern started to go on their 21-4 run or whatever it was at the time. Um, and then IU fans were headed for the exits early. So it's things like that where you have a fan base that wants you to succeed. They're showing up for you at home on the road. India is one of I'm it's a controversial fan base, especially this year, but it's still a fan base that is one massive and two, not to be redundant, but fanatical. Like it is insane how much the fans care about this program. And you go on the road, you're winning at halftime. In the second half, you come out slow, you hear your chants, and then give up a 21-4 run. It just hurts. And that's why people are so frustrated, is because they're showing out for this team day in, day out, at home on the road, and the same problems continue to arise. And the there have been attempts to fix it. I'll give them credit. There have been developments. There have been certain things that have improved. Um, but again, Mike Woodson said before the year started, the expectation is to win the Big Ten and eventually win a national championship here at Indiana. Those expectations are I mean, there's still plenty of time, but those, at least at this rate, they're not on track to be met. And that's why the fans are upset. They have a right to be upset. They also have a right to continue to be fans. Like, just don't turn on this program just because they lost a game. Like, that's where I get frustrated. But anyways, as I wrap this up, I have a lot of feelings on this topic, if you couldn't tell. When you have a couple thousand, maybe a good hundred, few hundred fans on the road, cheering for you, taking over an arena, you got to do something to feed off that energy, and the energy just wasn't there.
I don't think there was a single time where any IU players like pumping the crowd up. Like I saw that with Northwestern. I really did not see that with Indiana. And Chris Collins took the timeout at the end of the first half. I don't even know if he took another one in the second half. There were a lot of whistles. There was obviously the injury timeout for when Barnheiser unfortunately fell on his face after that dunk. But it felt like there wasn't a single time where there was a ton of momentum for IU in that second half, and they were still in it. Like they went on a few runs. Like Mbako hit it. He had what three or four threes, and he had three of five in the second half from three. I think two of them were late. Goody had a few of them late as well. There were like four threes for IU in the last 2.5, 3 minutes. But other than that, like, and Indiana was like hoping that just Northwestern would miss free throws. And to be fair, Barnheiser was 4 of 9 at the free throw line. Nicholson was a terrible free throw shooter, didn't actually get to shoot a free throw. Um, and then Sheravino, kind of their backup big, with missed two free throws as well. But Indiana was just hoping Northwestern would miss free throws, and yeah, just the effort level from the team wasn't there. From the fans, it was like that. Felt like an Indiana home game, like it really did. And in years past, the Northwestern student section would kind of really rise to the top in terms of the noise they'd be making because they're behind both baskets. You got the band right next to them. Like there's not a bad seat in Welsh-Ryan Arena, and I know you've been there, and you know that. But it's just that the noise kind of all funnels in, like, and it really felt like it really good IU crowd. You look around like at halftime when I was walking out, it's like, holy cow, like there's just IU fans everywhere. And obviously we're sitting behind the IU bench in the 200 levels, so we're around a lot of everyone else wearing cream and crimson. But you could just tell there was a good energy, even in the concession lines. You could tell there was a buzz. It was like, all right, we're in it here. We're up by five, up by what is it? Up by 6. We're playing really well. We're doing the right things. And then everything just falls apart. And then at the end of the game, just there was kind of an urgency, but there was a few times there was one instance where Indiana took 26 seconds on a possession with like under 4 minutes left. Like at that point, it was a 12-point game. It's like every possession, you got to get 10, 15 seconds. Either you get to the basket and try and get an easy layup, or passing out and try and find an open guy for three. You got to take shots. Indiana took 26 seconds on one possession late. They got a three in the very end. I think Ibaka was the one that hit it. Then there was another time where it was 2-on-2 with Rice and Mbako, and Rice just peels it out. And it's like, you got to go, man. Like, you just take it to the basket, go up, try and get the foul call, try and get the basket. If not, I mean, you can't be, get slapped on the wrist for trying because you're losing by double digits. Like, the time is running out. There was no urgency. And Northwestern, I thought, did a terrible job inbounding half court offense late. Like they really got lucky that Barnheiser made, I think, two straight at the end and then hit a tough shot to kind of end it. But it was just like sloppy. There was nothing in like, oh, Indiana's down by 10. There was no urgency. Like every time I even make a bucket, it'd be like the coaching staff would be like pointing, like get fouled, get to the half court line, get to the baseline, and show some sort of effort defensively. There just wasn't any of that really, and it's always kind of been that way where Indiana hasn't been able. They don't press at the right time. They don't foul at the right time. And last night they did foul and they needed to. But just the presses have been like sometimes they've been great and other times they've been like, what the heck was that? Like what was the point of pressing? Like so I just think that the end of game execution from IU losing, and sometimes it's worked and it always somehow works against Northwestern. I don't know what Northwestern practice is, but that's one thing clearly they need to work on is their kind of end of game executions. And they got the steal in the end for Barnheiser and the exclamation point dunk put things away. But just even like at the end of the game, you're down by 10. It's like Are you showing effort to go out and try and come back? Are you just kind of like, oh, 26 seconds, we'll take on a possession, shoot a three, fine, great, it goes in. We'll kind of let them inbound. Like we won't pressure the inbounder. Like, what is this, man?
I feel like we've said this a lot, but I'll say it again because it holds true again. Indiana has 14 wins this season. I don't think there's a single one of those 14 games where it felt like Indiana played a convincing full 40 minutes of basketball. There's always a stretch, a segment, a half, uh, could be even more than a half, where it just doesn't go right in any way, shape, or form. And in this one, it was that second half segment, the 21-4 run. Um, it happened a couple times actually, because in a game of runs, you'll see that. But even in the games against like SIUE and Eastern Illinois in the non-conference, in the Bahamas especially, it doesn't feel like we've seen a full 40 minutes of 100% effort, 100% competent Indiana basketball. And that's a concern, because good teams, will limit at least those segments, those halves, those stretches of poor play. And we just haven't seen too much of that. Like, there hasn't been a game this year where I've been like, huh, Indiana played really well. They deserve to win. Like, it just, I like the 14 wins. 14 is a good number to be at. A lot of people will disagree. There's still a lot of game left, a lot of quad one opportunities left. But if you want to win those quad one opportunities, and this was one of them here at Northwestern, you have to play a complete 40 minutes of basketball, or at least limit those stretches. And maybe you play 37 minutes of complete basketball. This was not that. And Indiana has not been able to do that this whole year. And it's just frustrating to see because I know this team is capable. We've seen some stretches where this team has looked unstoppable. Um, but it's just the self-inflicted wounds and the effort and all the controllable things that I believe at least are holding this team back.
Mike Woodson has run out of answers, seemingly. Last night, he says kind of, what does it take to get this team over the hump? Because that's his term. He goes, I don't know. Like that's a sign where it's like you have just essentially raised your hands, you've thrown in the towel, and you say, you know what? I don't know what's wrong because the players are trying to do things, but it's like that I ask of them, but it's just head scratching. It really is. The Minnesota game is the only one I can maybe think of where they played well, I think, for most of the 40 minutes. The first 5 minutes, no one could stop scoring. And that's, I think, just the energy of the first Big Ten game and whatnot. But you're right. Other than that, it's like, what game can we point at? It's like, this is Indiana's best win so far this year. Like the Palestra, they dominated that game really at the Palestra. The second half, I thought that Indiana played really well for the first 10, 12 minutes. Then there's a terrible 5 minute stretch, and you have to, make the shots late to win the game, but and make your free throws. Like it should not be this way. And this is why, the net hates Indiana. Like the non-conference schedule is one thing, but if you win these games all comfortably by 15, 20 points, we said 15, 20. We said it every game. I try to do the math for every game before the Bahamas and even the games around the Bahamas at Assembly Hall. It's like, can you win all these games by 15, 20? And SIUE was nervy in the first half, but they pulled away. Eastern Illinois, horrible first half. You're losing to Eastern Illinois on your home floor at half. You win the game by 35, fine. The third game, I don't know. South Carolina was the next game. You play really well for 30 minutes, and then the last, under four timeout, it's like a 7, 8 point game when it should have been a 15-point game. Um, then the worst game of them all was right before the Bahamas, UNC Greensboro, I think. I get them and Chattanooga mixed up. They're the same stupid colors. But it was UNCG. Indiana wins that game by like 7 or 8. They were in control, I think, for most part, but they only win that game by single digits, and that was the game Mike Woodson didn't give players to anybody. And it got better afterwards, after the Bahamas. Sam Houston State was a dominant win. After that, it's like I forget the schedule, honestly. Like all these games, like Chattanooga was a tight win. Winthrop wasn't great. There's a few other games mixed in there. I've given up. The non-conference schedule is behind me now. But you're right. Like this is why Indiana's so low in the net, and everyone knows why. But no one wants to like be like, all right, we have to be more competitive. Like this is unacceptable for a team that arguably has the top talent in the Big Ten. It's one of the worst computer rankings in the Big Ten with such a soft schedule. My goodness, they played nobody in the non-conference slate at Assembly Hall. And I don't even know what the margin was for the non-conference games at home, what the final average margin of victory. At least they didn't lose any of them, which is fine. Um, but it was just pathetic, and we can keep pointing to this, like things that happen in the non-conference schedule, especially now with the non-conference teams are better because of the transfer portal, and it's like things that we see are going to be translatable. Last year in the non-conference schedule, Indiana was worse than they were this year, and there was a reason why. Indiana was what 6-10 at one point in the Big Ten with 4 games left. Like it's the same this year. Like they're a little bit better in the non-conference this year. They're a little bit better in conference play than they were a year ago. But then yet again, you're staring right into the gauntlet of Maryland at home, ranked opponent, ranked opponent, ranked opponent, ranked opponent, ranked opponent, and most of them are on the road. It's like, where is Indiana's next like guaranteed win going to be? We don't have that. We said that for Ohio State. Like I was confident Indiana was going to come back from the disaster against Illinois and win that game. When's the next time I'm confident IU's going to win a game? Is it Washington? Do I trust Indiana to go out to the West Coast and play well? These games don't tell me yes. Like it's not a clear yes when it should be. Washington's not going to make the Big Ten tournament.
Let's I have a little activity plan as we started to do these a little bit more. You talk about the first half of the schedule being extremely easy, and then the second half of the schedule, which is, I believe, the toughest remaining schedule in the Big Ten. Let's go through. I have the net rankings pulled up as they stand right now. Let's go through the non-conference schedule and see where the non-conference teams stand, and then we'll look at the second half of the season. So, for reference right now, Indiana is at 65 in the net. Okay. You look at teams, we'll start with the best wins of the non-conference schedule. All right, so Providence and South Carolina. They are back to back with each other in the net at 89 and 90. So those are the top two wins in the non-conference schedule. Providence is 9 and 10 in the Big East. South Carolina is 10 and 9 in the SEC. So those wins aren't really doing you any good. Those are what, quad three, quad two, something? I don't know.
Yeah, I think one of them's quad two and the other one might be quad three. I'm trying to figure it out now. Quad two is home 31 to 75, neutral 51 to 100. So the game against Providence is quad two, and then the quad three against South Carolina.
Okay. And then you look, I mean, those are really the only two decent wins in the non-conference schedule. Then, I mean, just for fun, you look at teams like SIUE, who's at 235, UNC Greensboro's at 113, Eastern Illinois is 339. Like, non-conference meant absolutely nothing. Um, and that's why Indiana, like you said, is struggling in the net. So as we take a look at the future schedule, which is a gauntlet to say the least, you got Maryland, and then ranked road games. So at number 11 Purdue, at number 18 Wisconsin, versus number 21 Michigan, at number 8 Michigan State. You get a break at home for UCLA, who's unranked, and then you play ranked Purdue again, and then Penn State, Washington, then ranked Oregon, and then Ohio State at home. Like you had to win this Northwestern game. You had to, um, because if Indiana doesn't win against Maryland, they're in real trouble. That's going to be more of a must-win game for me, looking forward than the Northwestern game was. But I mean, you just like you said, Austin, you look at the first half of the season, you look at the non-conference, it really hurt Indiana more than it helped. It didn't give them any resume building wins. I mean, South Carolina was supposed to be the marquee game of the non-conference schedule, they're 90 in the net. Like it just didn't work out. Um, and now you got to play what, 4 games on the road against ranked opponents coming up in the second half of the schedule. They put themselves in the situation, but it's tough. It's really tough.
And it hurt Indiana, the non-conference, by a heck of a lot more than it helped. It wasn't even close. Like we all knew it. After that trip to the Bahamas, it's like this non-conference is a wash. Like Indiana could have won the last what 3, 4 non-conference games by 80 points each, and it would have been like, well, Indiana failed in the quad one games in the Bahamas, and they completely fell flat on their face, just like Brooks Barnheiser on national TV in the biggest stage. Like that's where the game ended up. That's where IU's non-conference ended up sitting at, and it's frustrating to think that people would have thought it actually would have changed. Like you're gonna have 1 or 2 bad games in the non-conference schedule. Everybody is. Everyone's gonna have a close game, bite the nails. Few, if you win, move on. Great. And some teams even lost. Like think about it. Like there were a lot of Big Ten teams last year in the beginning of the year that lost these games. Michigan State lost to James Madison. There were a few other like bad losses in there. Did Northwestern lost to like Chicago State at home, like after beating Purdue. Like what a like complete like whoa, a high and then a low. Like Indiana didn't have that bad loss, and we said it all last year. Indiana's best win was the fact that at this point last year in January, they did not have a bad loss to a bad team. They had bad margin of losses. They got smoked by Purdue at home by this point last year. But it just wasn't the same like thinking. Like, all right, like if you keep winning these games at home, you still have 1 or 2 on the road. Like in team last year was was in decent shape, and then the loss to Penn State, everything fell apart. This year, it's like, man, every game at home is a must win. Like I truly think Indiana cannot afford to lose a single another game at home. Like they're not going to beat Purdue at Mackey. They're not going to beat Wisconsin at the Kohl Center. Um, Washington, maybe. Oregon's a funky team, but I don't think so. I don't even know what the other games are at this point. Michigan State, forget about that. Yeah, no chance they win at the Breslin. Like, this is where Indiana is. Like, you had a chance to win at Nebraska. You fell apart in the last 5 minutes. You had a chance to win at Northwestern, a place you have not gotten blown out at in a long time. And that's like the last 8 minutes, you completely fall apart. You capitulate. You lose that game by 9. Like, this is where Indiana is at, Ian. Like you've had chances to win these games, and then it's just bad segments. And the bad segment against Northwestern was as soon as Malik Reneau re-entered the game and Indiana went back to that two big lineup. We have not mentioned this. We really buried the lead, I feel like, here with this. Malik Reneau returns, kind of maybe a little bit of a surprise. We knew he was on his way back. He was practicing, didn't know how game ready he was. And we know Mike Woodson always keeps things quiet with injuries. You can look at the Race Thompson incident where, boom, he magically appears out of the snap of a finger. Wow, he's getting ready to check in. Nobody would have expected that. It wasn't quite that with Reneau in Evanston, but like he did not offer a lot. 11 minutes, 2 points, made both of his free throws, had 3 rebounds. And Indiana, the two big setup was terrible. They had no offense. They tried to force the ball inside. There were a bunch of turnovers. Ballo in the first half, I don't think was even phenomenal. 7 points, 3 rebounds in 17 minutes, 2 of 5 from the field, and he ended up with 7 assists. And he played 19 of the 20 minutes. He had 5 of those 7 assists in the second half, and ends up with 15 points, 7 rebounds, and or 7 boards and 7 assists, which is a pretty darn good line for him, considering Nicholson's such a bigger player than he is and such a force defensively, where Indiana couldn't get anything going against him. But with 8 minutes left, why are you putting in Malik Reneau and Umar Ballo together? You've played your best basketball without Malik Reneau, and as soon as he comes in the first half, it's like, oh, here we go again. It's like it's not back to the future. It's like ahead to the past. Like we're fast forwarding ahead to what we saw previously, and that was terrible basketball. That there's no high-low action. You're getting clogged up in the paint. There's too much room inside on the defensive end to where the screens are able to be set from Northwestern. That leads to those open threes from, oh, let's see. Jalen Leach had 3 threes. Nick Martinelli, 2 threes. Barnheiser only had 1, and then Ty Berry had 7 threes. Like, it was just anyone was shooting the 3 ball last night for Northwestern. And Mike Woodson still decides to go with the two bigs at the most important juncture of the game. I want to look at exactly what the score was after the under eight timeout. Let's see here. Media timeout, 7:57. It is 54 to 52. Northwestern is up by 2 points after a Tyberry made three. Indiana had the basketball coming out of the timeout. You're down by two. You have 8 minutes left. Play your best basketball. Play the same way you did the first 8 minutes, the last 8 minutes of the first half, and you win this game. And Indiana goes back to the two bigs. Malik Reneau, Nomar Ballo should not be playing a single minute on the floor together. And the ratio last night. Ballo played 36 minutes. Renew played 11. That adds up to 47 minutes. So there should not be 7 minutes. Those two are on the floor together. The end.
I'm going to build off of that, and this is going to sound even worse. Malik Reneau in the first half scored 2 points, the only 2 points he scored. He was 0 of 4 from the field, and it was all layups. Like he just could not get anything to fall. So he only played 8 minutes in that first half. He was a -3. And as soon as he got pulled out, Indiana got right back on track. And you think to the interview in the first half, and Mike Woodson says, I don't know how much Malik Reneau is going to play. His conditioning's awful. So then you go to the second half. And you bring in Malik Reneau out of the under eight timeout, down by two, already acknowledging that his conditioning is awful and you don't know how much he's going to play. He plays a 2 minute segment and was a -8 in 2 minutes out of that under eight timeout. And then he comes right back off the floor. Like you acknowledge that his conditioning is terrible. You acknowledge that he's probably not going to play too much. You acknowledge that, he's still coming off the injury. He's still got a ways to go. So why would you bring him in one of the most crucial situations out of a timeout in the game where you're only down by 2 points on the road? You have a little bit of momentum. You lost a little momentum. You bring him in. He's a -8 in 2 minutes, and all of a sudden you're down by double digits. That's where I'm losing the logic of this decision here. And it just kind of derailed everything for the rest of the half.
The first half, I actually understood why Indiana brought Renew in, and it was because one, well, Matt Nicholson got hit. I think it was in Baco when he grabbed an offensive rebound, kind of brings the ball up top and elbows him accidentally, and kind of gets him right in the facial area, and they had to bring him out to patch him up. And I understand why they brought Renew in. Go to the two bigs like Northwestern's backups. Luke Hunger, 3 minutes. The backup big. He's pathetic. I think Fitzmore, Hunger they brought in, and Sheravine only played 7 minutes, and he was a nothing either. Like Northwestern got nothing going in the paint. They had 24 points in the paint, but a lot of those were just on drives from like Barnheiser or Martinelli, and it wasn't, the traditional big men back to the basket and scoring. And I understood why Indiana brought Renew in because Ballo was getting nothing on Nicholson. Like there was no penetration. He was not getting to his spots and not making his shots. And I get it. Like Renew's a little bit slip. He works around bigger guys a little bit easier. He can turn to that left hand against bigger guys and score off the glass. I understood it. Like even there were times he can turn around that lefty hook shot. I trust Renew more to make than Ballo, whatever hand he even shoots hook shots with, considering he's shooting free throws with the other hand this year. I don't even know which one I'd want to see Ballo shoot hook shots with. But he had one of those that's like, that's putrid. I never want to see that again. So I understand why they brought him in. But if you are really counteracting yourself, Mike Woodson, what the heck are you doing? Either he's ready to go or he's not ready to go. Like you don't 100% need him back. Like Northwestern is not the traditional we work high low. Like we'll get the ball to the inside, we'll kick it out to the outside. Like that's not the way it works. Like Northwestern's guards, this is a team that slashes to the basket. Then they'll pass it out and find the open man or a trigger and then a guy cutting to the basket. Like it's not Nicholson the one that's going to be passing, going to be giving out assists. Nicholson had 2 assists last night. Ballo had 7. Like there's a lot more offense for Indiana when the big man has the ball than for the Wildcats. And to be fair, like the turnovers in the first 4 minutes, I think really screwed Indiana because I thought Miles Rice didn't have a bad game. Like Indiana was going for like double screens, trying to get him around a bunch of guys, and that was working. Like Northwestern was switching, but switching to matchups which Indiana liked. And then there was that I think he had a few times where he's driving to the middle. I don't know if Balo has it, and someone cuts. Like Leo had that cut, and then like he tried dunking it, the ball goes off the rim. He's hanging on the rim, and the ball goes in, but it doesn't count. It's basket interference, and it looks like Leo just dunked on himself. Even though that was a solid drive to the basket, that was just what was missing for Indiana because I thought they got some decent looks, even from the inside. Like they got a bunch of good looks from the outside, and to their credit, Indiana knocked them down. Indiana shot 45% from three. Like that's pretty damn good for this team. 9 for 20. And these two teams came in towards the bottom of the Big Ten in 3 pointers, and they combined to make 22 out of 47, which puts you at a percentage of 47%. So like in this kind of game, you have to adjust. And Indiana didn't do that too late. Luke Goody took 5 shots in the first half. He took 1 3. You can't have that happen. And they didn't adjust to that either in the second half. Again, Chris Collins outcoaches Mike Woodson in the second half, and that's the sum total of the story. And let's be honest, like I was surprised Mbako and Goody basically made every three they possibly could with like in the last 4 minutes just to keep this game semi-interesting. So the folks who didn't leave at the under 8 time or the under 4 timeout left with like 2 minutes left when the game went from 11 to 4 and then back up to 7 or 8.
I think we've covered about everything on the main points, but I just want to um, take a look at one more thing. And we've been talking about the bench all year. And I mean, granted, you have Leo moving up to the starting lineup. Goody was a bench piece early. And then, Renew's coming off the injury. But Indiana did not have a bench point in the second half and only had 9 bench points for the game, which came from 7 Trey Galloway points and those 2 Renew free throws. Also, Bryson Tucker was out, so take that with a little grain of salt. But the rotations were very, very starter heavy, like especially in the second half. I mean, in the second half, minutes wise, Rice 18, Leal 11, Goody 20, Follow 19, and Mbako 14. And then off the bench, Galloway led with 14, and then Carlisle and Renew each had 2, and they were both a -8 in those 2 minutes. Um, so can you attribute the second half to tiredness? I don't know. Because these guys were like, let's see if you look at the whole game. Um, you had Ball playing 36 out of 40, Goody 33, and then Leo Rice and Baco all in the high 20s. Um, that's another coaching decision. I don't know. I mean, the situation's difficult with Renew still hurt and the bench piece is not really, doing what they were brought in to do. But that's just something I noticed. I don't really know what to make of it. Just thought I'd put it out there.
Yeah, both teams just completely like stripped the benches in that second half. I mean, you mentioned that the 4 guys that scored all 54 points, they all played the entire half. And Nicholson played 15, and Fitzmaurice and Hunger. It's Fitzmaurice who's the backup to Nicholson. He played 4 minutes. So I mean, it was just like, and this is a Northwestern team that come off back-to-back overtime games. Like they had played essentially an extra quarter of a game compared to Indiana in the last stretch because of the extra period. And all 4 of those guys, Barry, Leach, Martinelli, Barnheiser, who will combine for the 54 points and all had double digits in the second half. They played the entire half, and Indiana just could not tire them out, could not, work the ball up the floor, turn the ball over 9 times, a lot of stop and start action, 12 bench points to 0 in the second half. That's essentially the difference considering points off turnovers. Again, 14 to 13. Indiana turns the ball over 5 more times, but Northwestern only gets 1 more point out of it. Like it was that same story in the first half where Indiana dominated in that fashion, but it's just the bench, there's not enough. And you miss Bryson Tucker. I get it. He's someone who can hit a long two to stop a run. Like we saw that with, I think, Mbako had a tough shot, which went in to stop the run. It's like that's not the shot you expect to stop the bleeding. But even so, like M'Baku in the first half, like actually had some good takes, but there's some other times where like there were some mismatches. Like if Nicholson's on you, man, try and take it to the basket, like or try and like create some separation for a three. Like that, the inbounds plays again. This is something I saw were horrible last night for Indiana, and that's where they're usually good with Mike Woodson's experience in the NBA. They had that one early with 6 seconds left on the timer after immediate timeout. Indiana gets the ball under the basket. I think the ball gets worked out to Ibaka with 3 seconds left, and he has no idea how much time's left on the shot clock. He's against Matt Nicholson, and he just like standing there, dribbling, and everyone's yelling shoot, and he throws one off the backboard, and it would have been a shot clock violation if Northwestern didn't grab it before the timer rang. But it was just like pathetic. Like Indiana did not know what matchups they could have used, and I thought the offense should have ran through Rice a little bit more, considering Leal was awful on the offensive end of the floor. To be fair, he did bring down what, 4 rebounds, 5 rebounds, 3 assists, but he had 4 fouls, 5 turnovers, but had just 1 point and missed his only three. Galloway, 2 of 8, 1 of 3 from beyond the arc, 5 assists, no rebounds, 7 points. Like these guys who you expect to help you out offensively, Renew 0 for 6, like just didn't happen. And Indiana did not realize which matchups worked. Northwestern figured out which matchups worked for them and completely like dominated Indiana because they went after Luke Goody a lot in that second half, and for the most part, it worked.
I'm gonna throw in one final fun tidbit into this game. Um, and it's another little game of what do these things have in common? One, Teddy Roosevelt was president. Two, the Wright brothers flew the first plane. And three, the Boston Americans win the World Series.
I think this is 1915, the last time Northwestern won 5 straight against Indiana.
It's actually 1903, which is 115 years since the last time Northwestern has beaten Indiana 3 times in a row.
Well, I thought, okay,
I think
maybe
that math sounds right.
yes,
Maybe.
that's just where it was. You want to know the final score of that fifth game? I had it here. I have it here that it's the last time. I think that streak started in 1903 or something like that. I think that fifth win was in 1915, but I could be wrong. The final score of that fifth straight win, whatever it was in the early 1900s, was 30 to 22.
Big Ten
That's
basketball. Oh, yeah.
That's that's 3 point arcless Big Ten basketball for you in the 30s, and it's funny to actually, or in the early 1900s, and it's funny to look back at like Northwestern success. Like they had 8 straight winning Big Ten seasons from 1930 to 1938. They won at least 9 or more Big Ten games in all 8 of those seasons, and this would be they're trying to make this the first time since then where they have uh, multiple winning seasons in the Big Ten because the last 2 years they were 22 and 12 overall and 12 and 8 in Big Ten play. The Wildcats were, and obviously you have Boo Buie, who's maybe a Mount Rushmore kind of player for them. But without him and without Ryan Langborg, like this is still a pretty good Northwestern team that returned a lot from last year. And even one of their better players, Leach, was silent in the first half, was 0 of 5 from the field, caught fire in the second half because Indiana defensively was a mess. So yeah, no, it's been a while since a lot of these things happened. Second time ever that Northwestern's won 5 straight against Indiana. There were some good jokes out there on Twitter about back then, but that's where it is. Like, yeah, I mean, the Teddy Roosevelt being president, the Wright brothers, like those are, things our kids are going to learn about in school. And it's like, yeah, this is when Northwestern was good against Indiana. Oh yeah, and when I was in college, it was also this way. So that's sign of the times.
Yep. It's when you think back to streaks in the early 1900s, whatever topic it is, if you have to go back that far to find a streak, it's probably not a good thing to look at if you're on the wrong side of the streak. And yeah, I mean, I think the best tweet that I saw was if you want to bet on Indiana against Northwestern, it's you can put $100 on plus 180 odds and you'll win zero or something like that. It was that about sums it up what the fan base is on right now.
Mike Woodson on the road. It's just and Northwestern at home. Northwestern's always like the team that would play terrible away from home and always play well at Welsh-Ryan. Like they beat Illinois this year in overtime, which it feels like is also just a ritual now at this point. They lost to Michigan State, who's the cream of the crop right now in the Big Ten, whether the referees are helping them or not. But regardless, like this Northwestern team is always going to play well at home. And I actually was a little more uh, positive and optimistic that Indiana would go in and win this game. But I didn't realize Renew would play, and I didn't realize Renew would be, that much of a negative contributor. But speaking of teams that play bad away from home, Indiana's got Maryland next at Assembly Hall, and Maryland is putrid. They have, I think, 5 wins under Kevin Willard away from home, 5 true road wins. I think Indiana gathered 5 true road wins like 2 years ago when TJD and Hood were together. So we'll see if history repeats itself and the home team holds serve.
I think the main concern there is Derek Queen going to drop 40 points? Because there's a little bit of revenge there from Queen. Of course, was thinking about coming to Indiana and ultimately decided against it. Um, the fan base is going to have some words for him, I bet. Not too big of a fan of him. The fan base is. I think he's a great player. I whatever. But I think the biggest thing to look at as far as booze is I think we all know is Mike Woodson. Is he going to get an intro video? Are they going to show him on the Jumbotron? Will they boo him off the court at halftime, regardless of if they're up or not? I'd probably say yes to all three of those. Um, that's just where the students are. That's where the fans are. I don't know. All I want is an Indiana win. I want to see a good basketball game. I want to see some mistakes get fixed. And whatever happens is going to happen. There's plenty of season left.
There is. Maybe it's the game where Indiana focuses a lot on Derek Queen, and it's Jordan Geronimo, somebody else that takes center stage, another former Hoosier who did not play well when he was at Assembly Hall last year. I don't think he even played well in the teams played in College Park early last March, I believe, towards the end of the regular season. Well, that does it for another lengthy episode of the House of Hoosier podcast, recapping the last 2 games. Indiana splits. They win against Ohio State. They drop one against Northwestern. Another winnable road game, which just slips from IU's fingertips. We have said that, and we are all too familiar with that over the last few years of the Mike Woodson era. So for Ian, I'm Austin. We'll be back next week after the Sunday game. It's then Indiana goes to Purdue on Friday. So we'll have a nice week to recap things. We'll probably bring a guest on as well before Indiana makes the trip up to West Lafayette. So thanks for tuning in. Stay tuned on our socials, House_Hoosier, both X, Twitter, whatever we're still calling it, and Instagram. We'll have plenty of clips, I assume. There's a lot to digest from this episode, but have a good weekend, everyone.